Hi, how you doing? So today I'm going to do a review of three high-end wheels. They're all similar, but they're all different. One is the Bavarian Pro. One is the VPG V-RSPG Pro. And the other one is the Grid RSR Porsche wheel. The two most similar would be these two, the VPG and the Grid, but there's some differences between them. They're both modeled after the Porsche RSR real-life car. And then the Bavarian is modeled after mainly, I would say, a Mercedes F1 wheel. Let's talk about the grips, then we'll talk about the shifters and clutches, and then we'll talk about the buttons, and lastly, the screens. So let's get into it. Okay, so grip-wise, hopefully I don't drop one of these things, but grip-wise, there's two things I want to talk about, the shape of the grip and the material of the grip. And by the way, they're all 300 millimeters, so that's no difference between the wheels. I prefer a grip that has a tackier feel to it, a grippier feel to it. You don't slide as easily, especially with bare hands. The Bavarian wheel and the Grid wheel both have material that I prefer, which is that tackier, less slippery material. The VPG has a material that's more slippery, and as a result, it's harder to drive this with hands without gloves. I mean, yeah, without gloves, but you can. It's good enough that you can, but it's a lot easier. You don't have to grip as hard with the more tacky material. Now, the shape of the grip is important too, and probably the best shape grip is actually the VPG. So material-wise, I prefer the Grid or the Bavarian, but the shape-wise, I prefer the VPG. And the reason why I prefer is because of a couple things. Oops, I'm all tangled up here. One is the overall circumference is bigger, so it just fits my hand better compared to the Grid. The Bavarian is actually even bigger still in terms of circumference, but this to me is the sweet spot in terms of my size of hand, which obviously is very subjective and different for everybody. The other thing is it's got a nice little ridge here to rest your finger, so when you're grabbing the wheel, it just gives you something else to grab onto, which helps some leverage. The Bavarian wheel has a similar kind of ledge up here. You can see that, should be able to see that, but it's a nice place to rest your finger. However, I still prefer, overall, I prefer this as my favorite grip because the material is as good as it gets. The shape is still really good, even though I do prefer the VPG slightly more, but I still prefer this as my favorite grip. Subjective, but I know other people will prefer this kind of material. I know Will from Boosted Media prefers it. I had someone comment on an earlier video I did of this wheel that he prefers this, so it's entirely up to you what you like, but I'm just telling you the differences. Speaking of grips on the Bavarian, when I first got this wheel, I was thinking, oh, this is perfect. There's a nice shape to it. It's good. But I drove it for an hour. And what I found was as you're turning the wheel, the thumb right here starts hitting up against the plastic and rubbing against the edges and the sharper edges in there. They're not really sharp, but they're there. And it just started to hurt after a while. And I was wearing gloves. So I was worried about that when I saw the design, but I figured I'd give it a try. And the grip is really good, but it'd be better if the rubber went up all the way here. Now I don't know how difficult that would be to engineer. Probably very difficult, but because I don't know what it would stick to unless you glue it, and then does the glue come off? So there's probably engineering issues around that. But this channel I thought would be too narrow. It's fine. It's not really too narrow. So I was happy about that. But then as you're turning the wheel, you hit this, and it got sore. So I would rank the grips on the wheels. In first place for me would be Grid, second place would be VPG, and third place would be Bavarian. All right, now let's talk about the backs of the wheel, the shifters. And this will be a juggling act for me. So let's start with the Grid wheel. The Grid wheel has, in my opinion, the best shifters of all three. but all three shifters are really, really good, like really good. The reason why I would choose the grid shifters over the other two as my best shifter is they're just quieter. The resistance is what I like. It's a lighter shift. The the Bavarian is the one that needs the most pull strength. And then lastly, the shifter has the most adjustments. You can adjust, slide this paddle out or in. You could flip it on the other side, and you can also undo this bolt here. And I think there's one on the other side. No, just the one side. And you can move the whole assembly up or down so you can get the perfect distance to your hands. I would probably like the paddle to be slightly longer, so I didn't have to reach as far. I'd like a little bit more overlap, but it's good enough. The VPG one has more overlap, so my finger overlaps it more, so it's a more comfortable. I don't have to stretch as much for it, and they feel really good. They're just a little noisier than the grid. So grid's a bit quieter than this. This probably is a bit more comfortable to actually use. These are comfortable enough, and the fact that they're quiet is why I choose them as my favorite. The all three wheels, by the way, have the clutches, and the Bavarian, sorry, the VPG, not the Bavarian, the VPG clutch is probably the hardest one to pull in. Then the Bavarian is next in terms of pull strength, and then finally the grid is the softest. All three are really easy to use. All three allow you to modulate the clutch really, really well. So I don't think there's anything to choose between them on that front. They all have an additional paddle at the top of some type. The Bavarian and the VPG have magnet-based paddles, and they feel the best. The grid has a rocker style, push-pull, so you can push or pull because it's a full rocker mechanism. It's fine. It's a bit more muddled feel versus these ones are more precise. I prefer the ones on the VPG or the Bavarian, to be honest. But I won't use it that much, so it's not that critical to me. Let's talk about so that's the grips and that's the paddles on the back. Let's talk about the buttons, and then we'll talk about the screen. Button-wise, I'm going to start with my least favorite, which is the grid. They're still very good, don't get me wrong, but they are you're less sure you've clicked a button. Like there's a click there, but it's not as clicky as the other ones. Then the next clickiest one would be the VPG, and the most clicky would be the Bavarian. So if you like a really clicky button, the Bavarian's the best, and then the next best would be the VPG, and then the grid RSR would be last. Again, all of them are fine, and it's not at all something I'm dissatisfied with the grid. I'm just giving you a relative clickiness. Let's talk about rotaries. So the rotaries on the VPG are good. They're a nice level of resistance, as are the grid wheels. The rotaries on the Bavarian are interesting. All three of these, 1, 2, 3, all have a different level of resistance. So this one's really light, this one's fairly heavy, and then this one's really heavy. So I know that they're working on a lighter version of this one. I don't know how light. I don't know if it's going to be this one or this one, but this style is meant for very quick things, like if you want to change maybe your fuel level or something like that, or I don't know. This is obviously meant for very one click at a time sort of thing, and then this one is pretty similar. So on a scale of stiffness, if this is a 3, this is like a 7, and this is a 10 relative stiffness. Speaking of rotaries, all the center ones on all of these wheels feel very similar in terms of the resistance. The prettiest ones are probably on the Bavarian wheel. I do like the fact that there's numbers and stuff on each of these indents for the rotaries here. So if you want to use this to have specific settings on cars where you can see the number, that's helpful. On the VPG, these stickers are okay, but it's hard to read the lettering here, here, and here. Like that says TCR, this is TC Con, this is ABS, and this is bias, and it's really hard to make out even with the lights on. Versus, you know, the grid one is far easier to read. It's not illuminated; it's just a sticker, but it's just far easier to read for some reason. Now, there's no stickers or lettering on this wheel, the Bavarian. Okay, let's talk about the screen and LEDs. So by far the best screen is the grid and the LEDs for two reasons. One, it's just a bigger screen. Like I think I don't know. Yeah. So the Bavarian has the smallest screen by the looks of it. I don't know the official measurements, but it's the smallest screen. And then the VPG at the bottom is in the middle, and then the grid has the biggest one. I know the grid is a Vocor, and I'm pretty sure one of the other wheels is Vocor, but I can't remember which one it was. The other thing is that the LEDs, I like how the LEDs are further spaced on this design wheel versus these ones are really close together. It's a minor detail, obviously personal preference, and by no means a big deal either way. Now, the other thing to realize that's different between the wheels is if I mount this wheel on this on my wheelbase, you can see how high the top of this is, and therefore how high the screen is, because this shaft here is mounted further down, so that makes everything just raise up because it's basically moving the wheel up. Now it does give it a different rotational center, so the rotational center is here versus the VPG, it's about there, but you can see that's not the rotational center of this wheel. So it's a bit more up and over feel with this. It gives you different feelings, not better or worse, it's just a different feeling. But the nice thing is it raises the screen up and the lights up, so it's more in your viewpoint. I've had wheels before where it's got screens and I end up not looking at them, largely because they're too far down in my field of view. I'm looking up here and this is just too far to go down. The closer it is to my field of view, the better, in my opinion. So just think about this. So if I was to, the top of this wheel lines up to roughly there. So let's call it the top of the LEDs. In comparison, if I move this one, the top of the wheel now is, like the other one was right at the top of the LEDs, this one is down here. So it's, what's that, 2 centimeters, 2.5 centimeters lower? So it's not in my view as easily, and so I'm less likely to use or look at the screen. So keep in mind that the grid was here, this one's about here, and if I was to say the top of the screen is about there, so the bottom of this light, let's take a look at the Bavarian. What am I going to do with all these wires? So the Bavarian, there we go, so the top of the screen is, top of the wheel is there, and the top of the screen is about there. So if you recall, the top of the screen of the VPG was there. So quite a bit, it's a little bit lower than the other two. So you're less likely to have this in your point of view. Now, another thing I haven't showed you is the costs and the weight, and we'll get to that in a sec. But they all have very different feel to them. You'll find out in a second that this is the lightest wheel, and then the VPG is the next lightest wheel. It's heavier, and then the grid is the heaviest of them all, which all contributes to the way the car feels. In addition, because of the center of rotation being different, that also gives it a different feel. I'm going to go back and put the VPG one back here. I'll show you what I mean. So here's the center of rotation is right at the sticker, right? Versus the center of rotation of the grid. I just blew up my car there. I should have turned it off. The grid, like remember the VPG was about here, but that's not the center of rotation. The center of rotation is about here on this one. So it's different. It gives it a different feel. Now let's compare the weight of the wheels. Let me just find my cheat notes on this. So let me turn this over to desktop view. So here's the pricing and the weight of the wheels. I weighed these wheels with my Simucube quick release and corresponding hub. Some of these came with hubs, so like the grid and the the grid and the VPG came with its own hub, and then I had to purchase a hub for the Bavarian, and I went with a GSI hub for that. So weight-wise, the grid is the heaviest by a decent margin, call it 330 grams over the VPG. And then the VPG is 150 grams heavier than the Bavarian Pro. So there's quite a bit of difference between the Bavarian Pro and the grid in terms of weight, and you feel it. So the Bavarian Pro, you get more feedback, more forces from the force feedback. So if you don't have a higher end direct drive, you're going to feel the force feedback more on the Bavarian. But I'm running the Simucube Pro, more than enough power to handle all three wheels. And it used to be that I thought that the grid RSR was too heavy, but I've since figured out ways of tuning the Simucube software so that I don't feel that weight, and it's not an issue at this point for me. So price-wise, the grid was the most expensive at $3,300, including $217 for duty and $60 for shipping, which was the least of the duty, surprisingly, considering it was the most expensive wheel. But $3,300 for that. And then the VPG and the Bavarian are the same price wheel, but the duty was cheaper on the VPG and it had no shipping, versus the Bavarian had the most expensive duty and it had the most expensive shipping. So, this is what looks like a $500 difference in price, but by the time you're done, it's only a $300 difference in price because of the extra duty and shipping. This is to Canada. Obviously, your country will vary, but this is my experience, and I put it all in Canadian dollars. So anyway, if I was to sum it all up, here's what I would say. I would say that the grid wheel is my favorite because it's got most of the things that I prefer. It's got the grippy material. It's got really quiet and good feeling shifters. It's got a great clutch that's easy to modulate. It has really consistent and easy to use rotaries here. It's lacking a funky switch. The Bavarian wins in that category because it's got two of them and they're all functioning. You can rotate up, down, left, right, and push. The VPG only has up, down, left, right, and push. It doesn't have rotate, and it's only got one. So clearly the Bavarian is the best in terms of funky grips.
Okay,
sorry, funky switches, not funky grips. Funky grips. There you go. There's a new thing. But coming back to why is this my preferred wheel? Price aside, I like the grips the best because it's got the grip material. Yeah, the shape's a little bit better on the VPG, but I prefer this kind of material. If you like the more slippery material, then maybe the VPG is better for you. But that combined with the shifters and the fact that the screen and the lights are a little higher in my field of view, that's why this is my favorite wheel. And the quality of this wheel is phenomenal. One thing I didn't mention, and you can't really see too well, but the grid comes with this little power box here. Why do I think that's important? Well, there's a normal plug here, which you can see me pointing to. It's the same plug that plugs in the back of the wheel. What does that do? That guarantees that if you're moving the wheel, no forces get transmitted to the USB cables, because there's USB that comes out of the back of this, back of this, and plugs into your PC. And so it isolates the USB from the turning of the wheel. And you turn the wheel, this cable moves. If it was just plugged into a USB cable, it could loosen it enough to disconnect your wheel. So I think that's a pretty big advantage. The attention to detail and the quality of the grid is phenomenal, and the fact that it's got these adjustable shifters up and down. I think all in all, it's worth the additional money. The next one I would choose would be the and again, this is just personal. They're all phenomenal wheels. I'd be happy to drive any one of them. The next one I would choose would be the VPG, because I do like the shape of the wheel grips, material notwithstanding. But if I wear gloves, it's perfectly fine. The shifters are really good. I like the more precise third paddle here over the grid. If the screen was higher and bigger, and then I would probably like this one more. I don't like the cheap stickers here, hard to read. The buttons are a little better than the grid, but overall, first place, second place, and third place would be the Bavarian. I actually thought the Bavarian was going to be my first choice when I ordered it. And it's very good. The grips in this hard material up here and the pain in my thumb is the reason why it's in last place. It's still a really good wheel though. Like it's not like I don't like it. I do like it a lot. But I don't need 3 wheels. And I'm going to sell one, maybe 2 of these 3 wheels. The one I won't be selling is the grid. I regretted selling it the first time I bought it, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. And so I'll sell one of these, and I don't know which one yet. I haven't decided, but we'll see. Or maybe I sell both of these and I'll keep my X29 as my backup wheel, just as a backup wheel. Or I'll sell the X29 and one of these, because I want 2 wheels. I just want one for backup. That's the reason why I want 2 wheels. But I don't need this many wheels. And I knew that when I bought them. I knew I wouldn't keep all of them. But I wanted to try them. And since I have them, I thought I could benefit somebody who's looking at these and having a direct comparison between these 3 high-end wheels. I thought that might be of value to some people. So anyway, hopefully that helps. And I wanted to keep this under 30 minutes. So I'm at 22 minutes now, I think. So that's probably a good time to end. Anyway, have a great time. See you on track. And if you want to see any of these wheels in action, come and check me out on Twitch at Crispy_iRacing. That's Crispy_iRacing. Anyway, have a great day. Cheers.